June 14, 1944. Arromanches les Bains, Normandy coast, 05:20 hours. The sea is still angry from the night, rolling in bruised gray swells that slap against the landing craft and spit salt into every open wound. Corporal James Holden of the Royal Engineers has not slept in 38 hours. His eyes are red throat raw uniform, stiff with dried seawater and diesel. His hands shake not from fear but from exhaustion and caffeine rations. Directly ahead of him, the French village of Arromanches sits under a low, colorless sky. Smoke hangs over the stone houses like a veil. Allied naval guns boom periodically from somewhere offshore, slow, methodical, impersonal thunder. Every few seconds, a dull thud rolls back across the channel wind, and you can feel it in your chest. But this beach is not an invasion beach anymore. D-Day was 8 days ago. This beach is supposed to become something else. England and France, the lieutenant had said. Holden hadn't understood. The bow ramp slams down. Cold water pours in. The command comes through. "Let's move, lads. Let's move. Let's move. We're on the clock." He jumps. He hits waist-deep water and stumbles forward with the others, wading past floating crates, splintered timbers, a half-sunk jeep that never made it off its landing craft. Over to his right, a Sherman DD tank, one of the amphibious Donald Duck tanks, sits at a tilted angle turret, sealed canvas flotation screen shredded. The tank looks like it drowned standing up. In front of him, riding high in the swell like steel islands, are the first pieces of something that should not exist. Massive steel boxes, dark, hollow, towering above the waterline. Phoenix caissons. They look like sunken buildings torn from a London dockyard and dragged across the channel. They are being positioned into a line slowly, precisely by tugboats and winches and shouted curses. In another hour, those boxes will be deliberately scuttled in a controlled sequence. They will hit bottom, settle on the seabed, and lock in place. When they do, Normandy will have a breakwater where yesterday there was only open sea. Holden shivers and squints through the salt spray at the organized insanity in front of him. This is not a beach resupply anymore. This is construction. This is industry. This is a port being built out of nothing, under fire, under deadline. 20 miles offshore, aboard the Japanese cruiser Tone in the Pacific, a captured Allied intelligence sketch is being laughed at. Rear Admiral Tomiji Koyanagi studies a translated briefing that British planners called Mulberry. The claim the Western Allies can land, hold a beachhead, and then build their own harbors out of prefabricated modules, floating piers, sunken block ships, modular roadways. A portable port. A harbor in a kit. Nonsense. He sets the paper down and smirks. So, they will tow England to France, he says. The room chuckles. Back in Normandy, nobody is laughing. Royal Navy tugs are dragging obsolete merchant ships, ancient steamers, tankers, freighters from God knows where, toward marked points on the naval chart. Those ships have been filled with sandbags, rubble, and cement. Their hulls have been wired with scuttling charges. They even have a code name, Gooseberries. In a few hours, those ships will be deliberately sunk in a rough semicircle offshore, creating an instant line of wave breaks. After that, bulldozers and cranes will offload from shallow draft barges, and they'll begin assembling long steel roadways, floating piers mounted on pontoons called whales and beetles. Those piers will stretch from deep water where Liberty ships and fuel tankers can anchor all the way to the sand. A ship will arrive. The cargo will drive off. Simple. Simple if you say it fast. Holden watches a pair of sappers lash a guide cable to one of the Phoenix caissons. The wind fights them. The tide pulls them. The sea does not want this. The sea never wants this. Clock is live, Lieutenant Fraser calls over the roar. Storm window closes in 48 hours. We miss it, everything backs up to England. The whole invasion chokes. Let's get the anchors in and don't die. That last part is delivered like a joke. Nobody laughs. Because everyone here understands the truth, the Allied invasion force is enormous, but it is fragile. Since June 6th, men have been landing by the tens of thousands. Tanks, artillery rations, ammunition, spare treads, fuel, everything an army eats just to stay alive for one more day. The beaches at Omaha, Gold, Juneau, Sword, and Utah are clogged with gear, piled high with crates, stalled vehicles, stacks of jerry cans like little metal shrines to gasoline. And there is one fact every private and every field marshal knows: without a deep water port, all of it can still die here. The Germans know it too. The port of Cherbourg to the west is still in German hands. Le Havre is still German. Calais is still German. Every intact harbor on the French coast big enough to unload heavy equipment is either defended by concrete, covered by artillery, or pre-sited for demolition. The logic in Berlin is clean, almost elegant: push them off the beaches before they open a real port. Destroy the supply line, and you kill the invasion. The logic in London is colder: build the port before the Germans understand what you're doing. Mulberry. Project codename Mulberry B. Destination Gold Beach sector. Location this stretch of Normandy shoreline. Holden doesn't know the whole plan. He doesn't know how many meetings this idea survived, how many Admiralty men thought it was lunacy, how many engineers in Scottish shipyards have been welding non-stop for 6 months to fabricate sections of floating roadway. He doesn't know how many of those Phoenix caissons were poured in secret dry docks along the Thames, disguised as breakwater experiments. He only knows what the lieutenant said on the way in. If we fail, divisions starve on the beach. If we succeed, Normandy becomes Liverpool. A voice behind him barks, "Move, sapper, move!" A truck nearly clips him in the surf. It's loaded with thick coils of cable like iron snakes, and its driver is white with fatigue and fury. Men are cursing in English, Welsh, Scottish, Canadian, French. Signals officers are waving flags on the shoreline. Someone is yelling for a medic. Somewhere behind the dunes, an 88-meter round cracks overhead and slams into the wet sand with a geyser of mud and seawater. Holden keeps moving. Because here's the real terror no one admits out loud, not even to themselves. They are not just landing an army. They are gambling the entire liberation of Western Europe on the idea that you can build a harbor faster than the enemy can destroy you for trying. June 15, 1944. Portsmouth Naval Base. Briefing Room 3. On the wall under a map of the Normandy coast hangs a chalkboard with 2 words at the top, in blunt naval handwriting: Mulberry, a Mulberry B, Mulberry. A, the American artificial harbor planned off Omaha Beach. Mulberry B, the British artificial harbor off Gold Beach near Arromanches. Rear Admiral William Tennant runs a gloved finger along the chalk-sketched outline of the British site. He has been awake for so long that coffee doesn't help anymore. Only anger helps now. "Gentlemen," he says to the circle of officers and engineers, "the Germans still believe this is temporary. They still believe we are fighting off barges. We will educate them shortly." A junior officer in tank gray overalls asks the question out loud that planners have said privately for months, "Sir, and if the weather turns?" Tennant doesn't look up from the board. "It won't," he says. Everyone in the room understands that this is not optimism. This is necessity. Because here's the part of the story the infantry on the beaches never see: Mulberry is an improvisation. It isn't "we got there and figured it out." This plan is older than the invasion maps. Back in 1942, 2 full years before D-Day, civil engineers, naval architects, and logistics officers in Britain stood around over cold sandwiches and sketch paper and tried to solve an impossible problem. What if we land in France and the Germans blow every usable port before we get there? Their answer was insane. They said, "Fine. Then we'll bring our own." They designed, in secret under classification, a modular harbor system that could be towed in pieces across the English Channel. They broke the harbor down into components like a child's construction set. Breakwaters. Outer walls to calm the sea. These would be formed partly from scuttled obsolete ships, gooseberries, and partly from giant prefabricated concrete caissons. Phoenixes, each the size of an apartment block. Floating roadways. Flexible steel bridges called whale roadways resting on pontoon platforms called beetles. These would rise and fall with the tide, yet stay stable enough to drive loaded trucks across. Pierheads. Spud pontoons that could be jacked up and down on hollow legs like giant metal water bugs. Cargo ships could tie up to them in deep water. Then vehicles could literally drive cargo from ship to shore. Fuel delivery. Pipe systems that would one day evolve into Pluto pipeline under the ocean to pump petrol directly to the continent. They tested these pieces on the coast of Scotland, in the Firth of Clyde in the Solent, behind barbed wire under watch. They built mock-ups. They ran storm simulations. They argued over anchoring loads, steel-fatigued tidal shear. Some Royal Navy officers said it was fantasy. Some Army logisticians said it was unnecessary. Some airmen said it wouldn't matter. The bombers will end the war first. And in offices in Tokyo, in Berlin, in Paris, Allied intelligence intercepts and rumor fragments about a portable harbor circulated and were mostly shrugged off. The reasoning sounded solid enough. You can't assemble an entire port in a combat zone. You can't sink block ships in a perfect curve while under artillery fire. You can't lay floating piers in open surf. Nature won't allow it. War won't allow it. Now in June 1944, nature and war are both being forced to cooperate. On the Normandy coast, Mulberry B is being hammered together at weapon speed. At Arromanches, the Gooseberry Line, the scuttled block ships is already settling into place. Some are British, some American. Some old Dutch and Norwegian freighters dragged out of retirement for one last mission. Painted letters still cling to their hulls, the ghosts of old company names. Now they are corpses on command, forming an instant artificial reef. Behind them, the Phoenix caissons are going down in sequence. Each one is a cathedral of poured concrete, 6,000 tons, 60-plus meters long, compartmentalized, designed to flood in a controlled way. Tugboats nose them into position like shepherd dogs guiding oxen. Flood her calls a naval engineer on a signal lamp. Valves open. The sea rushes in. One Phoenix groans, lists, settles, and locks onto the seabed with a low, grinding finality. A new wall rises from the channel. By the end of the day, the water in its lee is calmer. Not calm. Nothing is calm, but calmer. And in that slightly calmer water, Liberty ships begin edging closer than any Liberty ship has a right to be near a front line. On the horizon, in the hazy west, smoke still boils from German positions. The Wehrmacht is counterattacking near Carentan. Mortars pop in the hedgerows. Panzer's probe get hit by naval gunfire, pull back. The front is only miles inland, and it is not stable. But here in this growing ring of steel and concrete, cranes swing. Cargo nets lower, jeeps roll, fuel drums clatter. It is the sound of an economy arriving in pieces. By June 18th, the British have functioning pierheads that march out into the surf like steel causeways. Trucks are driving straight from sea to shore, not splashing through surf, not relying on tides, not waiting for a proper French port to fall. One American observer puts it in a report that will later be read with disbelief by German staff officers. The artificial harbor is in fact a port. He underlines that last word twice. And then, like in every good war story, the plan meets the thing no one can plan for. The weather turns. It happens fast. June 19th, 1944. A North Atlantic low-pressure system slides down like a hammer. Winds howl in off the channel. Swell builds fast and ugly, stacking into long, rolling walls that hammer the coast. Rain comes in sideways sheets. Visibility drops. The neat lines of landing craft start to yaw and twist. Anchors drag. Cables snap. Mulberry A, the American harbor off Omaha, takes the hit full force. Floating roadways tear. Beetles break free. Pierheads twist. Sections of the American harbor are ripped apart and thrown onto the beach like broken ribs. Photographs taken after the storm will show twisted steel spans lying on the sand, like dead bridges, and men standing next to them, looking very, very small. German intelligence analysts will later study those same photographs and circle them in red pencil writing in the margins, unsustainable in weather. They will not see the other photographs, because while Mulberry A is mauled, Mulberry B survives. Damaged, yes. Strained, yes. But alive. Its Phoenix breakwaters hold. Its gooseberry line blunts the worst of the swell. Its whale roadways flex instead of snap. British engineers work through the storm literally roped to their positions, in some cases reinforcing joints, dumping extra anchors, rewelding fractured plates in horizontal rain with water running down their sleeves. When the sky finally clears on June 22nd, the American Mulberry is declared beyond economic repair. Mulberry B Arromanches is declared operational. And from that moment forward, one artificial harbor is asked to carry the weight of an entire continent. June 23, 1944. Arromanches, Normandy. The air smells like hot oil and salt and cordite. The storm has passed. The sea is still rough, but it is something a man can look at again without swearing. And out beyond the now solid arc of sunken ships and Phoenix caissons, the horizon is crowded with silhouettes. Liberty ships, coasters, tankers, LSTs with their blunt noses and open maws. They sit in a staggered line like feeders at a trough, waiting for their turn at the pierheads. Inside the Mulberry B perimeter, the water is busy. Not chaotic busy. Tugs weave through like terriers. DUKW amphibious trucks churn past with supply crates stacked shoulder high. Bofors guns on the shore scan the sky for the last desperate Luftwaffe fighter-bomber runs. Signal flags snap in the wind. From above, from the low circling pass of an RAF photo-reconnaissance Spitfire, Mulberry B looks impossible. It looks like a proper port where there should only be surf. There is an outer wall. There are berths. There are piers. There is a road network. And that is the point. Because war runs on tonnage. Guns without shells are scrap. Tanks without fuel are bunkers. Infantry without food are bodies in 48 hours. The German High Command had assumed confidently that the Allies could not push meaningful tonnage across open beaches for long. And meaningful, in their calculus, meant this several thousand tons per day, escalating to over 10,000 tons per day, including heavy vehicles, artillery pieces, fuel bridging equipment, spare parts, and medical supplies. Not for one day, every day, in all weather. They assumed this was impossible without seizing a working port like Cherbourg. Now British beach logistics officers are filing tonnage reports that do not read like beach numbers. They read like dock numbers. 7,000 tons, 9,000 tons, 11,000 tons. By early July, Mulberry B is landing vehicles, fuel ammunition, and rations on a scale that allows entire divisions to keep pushing inland instead of pausing to wait for supply to catch up. You watching this in 2025 need to feel the weight of that. This is not boats unloading food. This is the industrial base of the United States and the British Empire being poured directly onto a battlefield in northern France through a harbor that did not exist 2 weeks ago. In a captured Wehrmacht field HQ near Caen, An Oberstleutnant with Army Group B intelligence spreads aerial photos across a table next to a map board. The photos have been taken by German reconnaissance aircraft that slipped past Allied fighters at dawn. He traces the arc of block ships, the rectangular shadows of the Phoenix caissons, the dark slashes of floating piers, the neat queue of cargo vessels anchored in what should be surf. His mouth tightens. He has heard reports from frontline units complaining that the British never seem to run out of 25-pounder shells. He has heard panzer commanders swearing that the Tommies are made of petrol, because every time they try to cut supply, they find yet another line of jerry cans, another truck convoy, another reserve depot, under camouflage netting in an orchard. Now he understands why. He circles Arromanches on the map with a pencil. He writes one word in the margin: Hafen, harbor. He slides the photo to his superior and says quietly, "They built a port." His superior snorts, "Nonsense. They have no port in Normandy." "We hold every—" "They built a port," he repeats sharper this time. A long silence settles in, because this is the part that feels like doom. It is not the tanks. It is not the bombing. It is not even the men. It is the realization that the Allies have solved the hardest problem in modern warfare, sustained logistics across water without a port faster than you can break them. That is when senior German officers stop thinking in terms of throw them back into the sea. After this moment, what they start thinking is quieter and colder. How long until they reach Paris? On the ground, Corporal Holden leans on a crate of rations and watches a Morris truck rumble down one of the Whale roadways, tires humming on steel. The truck drives off a pierhead that yesterday was being beaten by 6-foot waves and today is calmly accepting cargo straight from a deep draft freighter. There is something strangely beautiful about it. It doesn't look like heroism. It looks like work. Men with clipboards. Men with grease-stained hands. Men coordinating offload schedules in 12-hour blocks. Men who have not seen a bed in days and who are in their own way winning a continental war with wrenches. Holden takes a swallow from his canteen. It tastes like metal. He grimaces. He hears someone nearby say half to himself, "We're gonna feed an army through this thing." Someone else answers, "Not an army, an invasion." He lets that sit, because he can feel it now, and not just in speeches, in the ground, in the motion. For 8 days, Normandy felt like a foothold. Now Normandy feels like a base. And a base once established spreads. July 1944. Arromanches, Normandy. The Mulberry B harbor is now a constant machine. It never really sleeps. It just changes color with the sky. Under gray daylight, it's all motion cranes, swinging trucks, reversing, with shouted hand signals, forklifts whining DUKWs, burbling in and out with their blunt snouts. Under blackout conditions, it becomes a low constellation of hooded lamps, the clang of metal on metal, the cough of diesel engines kept it idle so they'll stay warm and ready. Official reports will later say in clipped language that Mulberry B landed over 2 million men vehicles and tons of supplies in the months after D-Day. Those numbers will appear in staff histories and logistics summaries, and they'll look clean and bloodless, like accounting. In reality, it looked like this: a medical lorry from the 50th Northumbrian Infantry Division backs onto a pierhead to receive morphine crates and field dressings. The driver still has dried blood on his sleeves from the morning's run near Tilly-sur-Seulles. A line of Sherman tanks is lashed down on an LST turrets covered in canvas, each one chalked with a unit marking and sometimes in white paint a name. Gladys, Killjoy, St. Louis Blues. They wait for the ramp to drop so they can roll clank grind forward into France like steel cattle. A sergeant from the Royal Army Service Corps is screaming himself hoarse over the rattle of chains, trying to keep the offload sequence timed to the minute. Behind him on the horizon, more ships. Always more ships. And on the beach itself, beyond the pierheads, beyond the Phoenix caissons, beyond the Gooseberry line, the evidence is already piling up in rows: stacked fuel drums, ammunition depots under camo nets, motor pools, temporary repair shops for tank suspensions, and bogey wheels, bulldozers carving access roads inland. This is no longer a landing. It is sustainment. It is permanence. And permanence in war is destiny. Because now the Allies can feed what they've brought ashore. They can reinforce it. They can replace it. They can scale it. Now they can plan not just to hold Normandy, but to break out of Normandy. Operation Cobra, the American breakout toward St. Lo and Arromanches, is already being whispered about. British and Canadian formations are grinding south toward Caen in brutal street fighting and against armored counterattacks. Every single one of those moves drinks fuel and ammunition at a shocking rate. Mulberry B is the tap. In Berlin, reports reach the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht that the Allies have effectively established a deep-water supply facility on an open beach. The phrasing in some of those reports is almost defensive, almost pleading. This was not supposed to be possible. It is quietly, brutally demoralizing. Because if you are a German staff officer in June-July 1944, you knew there was a best-case scenario: hold the line long enough to make the invasion stall. Bleed it, starve it, force the British and Americans to pause long enough for your panzer divisions to counterattack en masse, and throw them into the sea. You are now looking at photographs, undeniable photographs of trucks driving directly from a Liberty ship to a hedgerow in Normandy in one continuous motion. How do you throw that into the sea? There is one more layer to the horror. This entire harbor, this miracle of steel and concrete and nerve, is not, according to the Allied planners, the final form. It is the bridge. Cherbourg will fall. Other channel ports will fall. Antwerp will fall. Real permanent harbors will be seized, cleared, dredged, reopened. Mulberry is just the opening act. And yet without that opening act, there is no second act. Corporal Holden doesn't know about Antwerp. He doesn't know about Berlin. He doesn't even know if he'll live to see August. All he knows is that today, for the first time since he splashed ashore with salt in his boots and someone else's blood in the surf, he doesn't feel like he's standing on borrowed ground. He looks out at the line of Phoenix caissons, those concrete giants sitting shoulder to shoulder punching a hole in the channel itself. And he realizes something he will remember for the rest of his life. The invasion did not end on June 6th. It began on June 6th. It is here in this man-made harbor on a hostile shore that the Allies prove to themselves, to Germany, to history, that they are not guests in France. They are staying.